I finally did it. I played my first Metroid game. Today, I'm talking about Super Metroid. Super Metroid was developed by Nintendo R&D 1 and released on the Super Nintendo in 1994. It's a platform adventure game. It uses the conventions of a typical side-scrolling platformer while also putting a heavy emphasis on the exploration of a large continuous map and finding equipment or abilities that will allow you to access new areas. While the term Metroidvania didn't exist at the time Super Metroid released, it would become the standard name for the genre starting in the early 2000s. You play bounty hunter Samus Aran in a story that continues from the first two games in the series. Previously on Metroid. On orders from the Galactic Federation, Samus goes to the planet Zebes to fight the space pirates, who are trying to use a parasitic species called Metroids as a biological weapon. She defeats the space pirates and their biomechanical leader, Mother Brain. The Galactic Federation decides the Metroid species is too dangerous to exist and sends Samus to their homeworld to do some genocide. She does the genocide real good, and when the last remaining Metroid baby hatches and bonds with her, she takes it away from its home and leaves it at Ceres' research station for study. As Super Metroid opens, Samus receives a distress signal from Ceres and goes to investigate. Let's start with the good stuff, and there is a lot of good stuff. The opening of Super Metroid is excellent. I get to the research station and it's eerily lifeless. The scientists are dead, the tanks that once held their research, broken. I find the baby Metroid alone in a room, at least I thought it was alone. But then Ridley appears and attacks. The small amount of health I have is dropping fast. I haven't had to shoot anything yet, or had a chance to get used to the controls, and all of a sudden, I'm in a boss fight. I'm very concerned that I'm about to die before the game's even really started. But Ridley leaves with the Metroid before he can deplete my health fully. We're not out of danger yet though, as alarms start blaring and a 1-minute countdown appears. The station is about to be destroyed. My heart is thumping as I make my way back to the ship, watching the timer tick down out of the corner of my eye the whole time. I make it out in time and a cutscene shows Samus escaping as the station explodes behind her. This is how you start a game. After this initial rush, we head to the planet Zebes and try to get the Metroid back, and things settle into a more comfortable rhythm of exploration and isolation. Which brings us to another thing Metroid does very well. It's got great atmosphere. It's incredibly lonely, and everything is just so alien. When I first read that Ridley's enemies were space pirates, I pictured human pirates. In space. But no, when Ridley shows up, he's this weird pterodactyl-like creature, which is so much cooler. The enemy designs are great, and all really fitting of the environments you find them in. Those same environments are extremely hostile to you. As you descend deeper into the planet, every screen reinforces that you are not welcome in this place. The closest thing you see to a friendly face, some source of comfort amongst the isolation, are the Chozo. They appear in secluded dead ends, holding up orbs, seemingly making offerings to you. But the Chozo are long gone, and the helpful forms you come across are just statues. They offer you power by way of new abilities, but there is no comfort here. The soundtrack drives this home as well. While you're on the planet's surface, the music is rather epic. There are trumpets and booming percussion, it sounds adventurous and even triumphant, though your journey is just beginning. But as you advance into the caverns of Crateria, that music turns alien and disorienting. By the time you get to Meridia, you'll be accompanied by tracks that sound both creepy and melancholy. As unsympathetic as the environment is to you, other aspects of the game design do a great job of making the player feel increasingly more powerful. In the beginning, Samus is quite weak. She has a paltry 99 health and a pea shooter of an arm cannon. You'd think that this accomplished bounty hunter would be better equipped, but that would rob us of the joy of character progression. It's very satisfying to get a new ability like the morphing ball or the grappling beam and think, hey, I remember seeing somewhere I could use this. It makes backtracking to that spot more enjoyable than it should be, because you know you're going to find something new and good there. By the end of the game, you feel unstoppable, as you can go anywhere you need to, with a combination of shrinking down to fit in tight passages, jumping endlessly with space jump, or just good old-fashioned power bombs to clear away the block standing in your way. I also really like that most of your primary weapon upgrades stack. You don't have to choose between one shot that freezes enemies in place, one that has a wider spread, or one that can be charged up to hit harder. You can have all those things at once. Super Metroid constantly rewards you for exploring. Though there's a limit to the unique upgrades and abilities you can find, there are tons of items that increase your missile and bomb inventory or give you more energy tanks with which to increase your overall health. I was also happy with the overall difficulty of the game. Though there are lots of enemies and each area has at least one boss fight, it's really more about exploration than difficult, precision-heavy combat. Health and item restoring pickups are abundant, and I rarely found any fight difficult enough that it became frustrating. I'm also a big fan of the map and how detailed it is. Having computers in each area that gave you map data is a great way to let you know about places that are hidden while still letting you figure out exactly how to access them yourself. With all that said, Super Metroid is not without its problems. Let's talk about some of those now. You know how I said that combat was rarely frustrating? Well, there was an exception to that. Ridley. When I ran into him the second time, I felt like I had hit a brick wall. I must have given it 20 attempts before I resigned myself to exploring more to get extra energy tanks and super missiles. The most frustrating thing about it was that I had no idea how close I was getting. With no boss health bar, I didn't know if I almost had him or was still a ways from victory. No health bars also made it difficult to discern which of my weapons was the strongest. I had played the game assuming that super missiles were my most powerful shot, since they were limited in number and had super in the name. But apparently, charge shots are better? Not very intuitive. The tutorialization, how the game teaches you how to play, is inconsistent and at times inadequate. Missiles have an obvious purpose, and the game tells you how to use them. It tells you again every single time you pick up a missile tank to expand your capacity. I probably saw this instruction 40 times over the course of the game. But when you get Morphing Ball or Space Jump, two abilities which as a newcomer to the series are not as obvious, there's nothing. You have to check the manual if you want to know how to activate these. There are also a number of abilities like Wall Jump, Crystal Flash, Shine Spark, and various charge combos that I would never have known about if I hadn't read about them online. There are some little critters that demonstrate two of these abilities in the game, but the areas where this happens are off the critical path. If I hadn't had to backtrack to power up for the Ridley fight, I wouldn't have seen them at all. Why put abilities in a game and not bother to let the player know they're there? The biggest problem with Super Metroid, though, is the controls. They're not the worst, but they're not very good. When jumping or doing any kind of precision platforming, it always seemed like the controls were fighting against me. Samus feels floaty and imprecise, especially when trying to make smaller jumps. The poor controls are exacerbated when using any movement-enhancing abilities. The grappling beam is just a nightmare. The momentum from it doesn't make sense. For me, the time between getting the grapple beam and getting space jump was the least enjoyable section of the game by far. But I'm not letting space jump off the hook either. The timing of it is odd, and it's immensely sensitive to other inputs. After your first jump, you have to wait until you're starting to fall back down before you can jump again, rather than doing it at the height of the jump. You can also only do a space jump if you're moving horizontally when you start jumping, rather than be able to jump straight up when standing still. Plus, if you hit the up or down buttons while trying to change direction during space jump, you'll cancel it. There's little more exasperating than watching Samus helplessly fall down a long corridor because you grazed the up button or hit jump a split second too soon. I could space jump horizontally indefinitely, but going vertically always felt dicey. My last control complaint is about the items and how you use them. Missiles, bombs, and grapple are all activated using the fire button. This means when you have them selected, you can't shoot your main weapon. The selected item needs to be cancelled using Y to go back to your beam weapon. On boss fights, where I might want to switch between shooting missiles at the boss and normal beams at adds, it was very cumbersome. This problem is particularly annoying because there is such an easy alternative that would have improved things. Rather than have a cancel button to clear whatever item you have selected, why not have both a primary fire and a secondary fire? Then you could switch between your beam and missiles or even the grapple seamlessly. There is a fifth item, an X-ray scope, which allows you to see hidden passages and obstacles. This is used with the dash button rather than the fire button like everything else. Why? This is a late game pickup and mostly used to find secret areas and power-ups that you've missed in areas you've already visited. Why prevent the player from running while searching for secrets? Of course, you can cancel the X-ray scope, but then you need to press select 5 times every time you want to get back to it. The X-ray is useful because there are so many hidden passages and secrets, but the act of using it kills any momentum you have going. Just to end things on a positive note, I do like that you can remap the buttons in the menu, though that doesn't fix any of the issues I brought up here. I also like that the L and R buttons can be used to make Samus aim diagonally up or down or straight up in the air. It makes her very adaptable during fights. So how was my first Metroid experience? It was good. Super Metroid really excels at atmosphere, character progression, and level design. I also loved that there was a great map to uncover. But in terms of how it controls, it could be a lot better. A lot of the decisions made on how to control Samus were puzzling to me, and it seemed like there were obvious better alternatives. With a few improvements here, this game could have become a favorite. Okay, one last thing. Why do Samus's clothes fall off when she dies? Nintendo, why are you so obsessed with this woman's underwear? Today, we're talking about Metroid Dread. I honestly wasn't planning to review this game, but a lot of people have asked me to make a video. I did not record my whole playthrough because I wasn't planning to make a video, but I did get a bunch of little Switch clips, which I'll put in at random times. They may or may not be related to what I'm talking about. Also, this is just sort of a chatty kind of review. I've written down some bullet points, but I don't have a script that I'm going off for this. In terms of spoilers, just because it is a very new game, I'm not going to be talking about the story of this game basically at all, because it's not something I care about. I will be talking and possibly showing late game abilities and boss fights though, so if you don't want to see that stuff, then you might want to skip this video. And also, just to start off, the only Metroid game I've previously played is Super Metroid, which I reviewed. It's a very good game, though it could have been a little better. And it's really my only basis of comparison for the series and sort of what set my expectation going into this one. So just starting out with some first impressions I had of the game. When I started it up and for the first hour or so, I really didn't like it at all. It starts with a big long cutscene, which as I mentioned, I don't really care about. The last thing I knew about the story of Metroid was that Samus killed Mother Brain and got saved by a Metroid, and that was it. So I didn't really know who any of the characters were or what was happening, and again, I don't really play these kinds of games for the story. I like them for the action and the platforming and the combat. But the big thing, well, two big things that I really didn't like from the start were the amount of cutscenes and like little tiny cinematics. You can't skip any of these until you've already seen them once, and with the little tiny ones you can't skip them at all. There just seemed to be an abundance of like Samus walking through a door and then looking around the next room, and it's like you're kind of ruining the flow of the game here, and that happened a lot. People did tell me that stopped, and that's not necessarily true. The cutscenes and sort of parts where you can't physically control the game do taper off towards the middle, but there's still a bunch of them there. Again, just like those little tiny, like snatching control away from you for a few seconds things, which I didn't really think fit the game and I found frustrating. And the other thing was just the atmosphere and the visual style of the game. I think graphically it's proficient, like the graphics are good, but the art style is just very like sterile and soulless feeling. I expect from Metroid that I'm going to feel very like isolated, a little bit uncomfortable, like everything's really alien and dangerous to me. And I really didn't feel that at all from this game. It just felt like a sort of, again, just like this clean, sterile space station type atmosphere that I didn't particularly care for. None of the areas looked all that different. There was one I liked later on that was sort of had some greenery and some dinosaur looking enemies, but I felt like I wasn't even in that one for very long. So I did find that just the atmosphere was kind of lacking for me, and the visuals, some of the bosses looked cool, but I never found them impressive, and they were all just rather soulless. However, when it comes to this genre, it is one where I tend to like things more as the game goes on. As you're getting new abilities and learning new things, they do tend to get better, and that is the case here. I did definitely start liking the game more, although it was still overall quite hit or miss for me. One of the hits is the controls. Samus is just like beautiful to control. She's very fast and agile and fluid, and just like her running and jumping and shooting, it all feels very nice. There are some cases, like with the grapple beam, where it feels like you're just pushing almost every single button on the controller at once, which sometimes felt like, you know, a little bit too much and felt like my hands started to get sore. Also, I am a super missile kind of girl rather than a charge shot kind of girl, so I felt like I was constantly holding down right bumper, and it might have been nicer to just be able to toggle it on and off rather than just hold it down for almost the entire game. But aside from those things, the controls did work very nice, and Samus just has a very fluid, smooth movement that made it fun to run around. One thing I would have liked to see, though, is to be able to use the D-pad to control Samus. I really prefer the D-pad for controlling any kind of 2D action platformers, and that was just not available here. And what made it worse is that the D-pad wasn't really used for anything else. Late in the game, like pressing right on it is used for one ability, but that seems like very little in order to take that method of control away from the player completely. For the most part, I really loved all of the abilities in the game. Most of them were from Super Metroid, like the space jump, the screw attack. Those all felt really nice to use. Not all of them got as much use as they could have. Like, I found the grapple beam in particular, there's a little section of the map where you use it, and then it kind of gets forgotten a little bit. There's one ability, I think it's called the flash shift, which is like a dash, which I believe is new to the series, and that was fantastic. That made going through, especially boss fights or some of the tougher sub-boss fights, made them like really nice and quick. and that was one of the best additions, I think, in terms of abilities. However, there's also an ability that's basically a stealth where Samus just goes invisible, which can be used for something I'll talk about in a bit, or to open doors that have like motion detectors to sort of hide from them. This ability worked much less for me. Stealth was not something I ever wanted to have to do in a Metroid game or any Metroidvania game at all, so that one worked a little less well for me. At the beginning, the abilities are coming at a fairly decent pace, and you're getting to sort of use them and learn them as they go. Usually they'll be incorporated into the boss fights you come across in a really neat way. Near the end of the game though, like maybe the last third to a quarter, the pace really ramps up and you just start getting ability after ability after ability, like back to back. You get I think a cross bomb attack, and then maybe 30 minutes of play later, I got the super bomb attack. And a lot of these abilities are sort of overriding each other, or once you get one, you really don't need to use the others. Also for the wave beam, it sort of overwrites your previous shots. And I did find at the end, it was almost a little too fast, like you were getting these abilities, but they weren't really making the most of using them because they were just introducing new ones so quickly afterwards. But in general, the movement and abilities are very fun to use, and it does make going through the map, to the extent that you're going to do it, pretty enjoyable to do. So when it comes to the map and level design, I have a bit of mixed feelings. The actual sort of in-menu map is kind of interesting. It does this thing where if you select a certain obstacle or door that's blocked, it'll highlight those on the rest of the map. So if you've just gotten an ability that will let you bypass that, then you can see other places where that takes place, where you can now get into new areas, which is pretty cool. But it also does weird things, like it keeps the items or missile upgrades and things like that you've already collected on the map, which just makes it a little bit confusing and harder to read and notice right away which things you haven't collected. But the biggest problem with the map for me was I felt like it disincentivized me from doing much backtracking or exploring. The map is segmented into, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 main areas, and you travel between them using teleportals, which are basically just really long load screens between each section. And it just makes it more complicated than I feel like it needs to be to backtrack and go to other areas. The paths are not always clear. Sometimes you're opening up a new path, like by pushing a block away or something, but then the block falls and blocks an old path from being available to you. So it just makes backtracking more difficult than I think it needs to be. And often I felt like there were only key points in the game where it was available for me to backtrack and explore. So I often found myself just not doing it at all. I think when I got to the end of the game, I had only collected 37% of the items, which really isn't very much for me. A lot of the times the power-ups didn't really make all that much of a difference. Most of the things you'll be finding are +2 to your missile capacity, along with the occasional energy tank, but I didn't really feel rewarded by collecting those things. Throughout the entire game, I never ran out of missiles a single time, because as you're fighting things and doing bosses, they're constantly dropping, so you don't really need them. And then when it comes to energy tanks, they can help out in the sort of general exploration, but bosses hit so hard that having an extra energy tank or two really didn't seem to make that much of a difference. And one other thing that happened to me a few times, mostly near the beginning of the game, is that the critical path was blocked off by destroyable blocks, which I just found very frustrating. I think hiding secrets behind destroyable blocks, that's a good thing, but there were a few times when I felt like I was just stuck and had nowhere to go, and the solution was always to just like randomly shoot all around me until something broke and I could move forward. So wasn't a big fan of that. But now let's talk about the boss fights, which are probably my favorite part of this entire game. They're quite challenging, they're multi-phase, you really need to learn the patterns in order to be successful, and they make use of a new sort of parry move, which you can use. And a boss will do something that does a flash, and if you parry it, then you'll have a chance to really unload onto them and make them take a lot more damage. As well, they'll usually drop some health and extra missiles while this is happening. I thought that they were of a really good difficulty. It always starts out and like at the beginning of each phase, you're thinking like, oh my god, how am I ever going to do this? And then you try it a few more times and you're able to do it without taking any damage at all. And how long it takes to learn generally depends on how many phases there are, because each phase took a few times in order to learn that pattern. But once you really get it down, just like the quickness of the battles, the use of the parry, the use of that flash shift, make them just really engaging and exciting fights. There are also a whole bunch of sort of like mini bosses or sub bosses that you'll be fighting multiple times throughout the game. And I actually found a bunch of these more difficult, or at least they took me more attempts than the bosses. The big bosses, there's actually not that many of them, maybe like 6 or something, but the first few only took me maybe 4 or 5 attempts. The last 2 are the most difficult ones, and those took a little bit longer. But some of the sub-bosses could be very difficult, and again, you really needed to make use of that parry move in order to sort of like open up their weak spots so that you could kill them. I did find the bosses, again, felt a little out of place though, especially the first few. I'm just used to these bosses and these games in general just being like, you're right there, you're in control the whole time. But the bosses kind of reminded me of the first God of War game, how they have little sort of cinematics in the middle of them and basically quick time events, except there's not button prompts, there's just the flash to make you do the parry. But it does feel strange when you're in the middle of an exciting boss fight and then it pulls away and there's a cutscene of Samus running around and shooting things, or you do the parry and then you just have to like bash the missile button a bunch of times, like you're just, you know, hitting A as fast as you can. It's not A though. So that was kind of weird. I did find those sort of lessened again as the boss fights went on, but it was just another sort of strange choice to just throw cinematics into the middle of boss fights. But if you take those away, again, I did find the boss fights themselves very exciting and of a good challenge. Of course, we have to talk about the part of this game where the dread comes in, and that is the Emmys. These are these sort of Terminator-like machines which will come after you. Each level, each world, stage, whatever, has a section that these Emmys are confined to. You'll know when you're going into one, and they'll basically be tracking you down, and you need to get away from them until you're able to find a weapon that will let you defeat them. Because until you have that weapon, you really can't hurt them. And I just thought these sucked. Like, they ruined the game. Like, every time I'm excited, I think I'm like, okay, I'm really getting into this game, I'm having a good time, oh, I just beat a difficult boss, I'm feeling really pumped. You go into a new area and there's another fucking Emmy, and it just like feels like hitting a wall in terms of enjoyment of the game. And this is the place where your new stealth ability tends to come in the most, and I just feel like I'm a woman in power armor, I have an arm cannon, I don't want to stealth, I am not made for stealthing, let me fight things, let me jump around and screw attack and like do fun things. Stealthing around and trying not to be seen by these things and caught by these things, like it did instill a sense of dread, not because it was scary or intense or intimidating, just because it was really annoying. When they catch you, you basically get a chance to sort of stun them and run away. I found this almost impossible to do. I had no problem with the parry moves during bosses, but with these Emmys, I had a better chance to get away from them if I just looked away from the screen and randomly smacked my controller than when I was actually doing it. So maybe I just wasn't getting what I was supposed to do there. But regardless, it was just annoying. And again, there's cutscenes then, the little mini cutscenes when they catch you, and I would have rather them just insta-kill me and just get it over with than make me watch that stupid cutscene over and over and over again. So the Emmys just function to make the entire game less fun, and once you finally got the weapon you need to defeat them, that's not even that interesting either. You defeat them all in the exact same way by holding buttons down for a long time and aiming at them, and it wasn't satisfying. It wasn't like, oh wow, I finally got this tough thing. It was just like, finally this thing is dead. I can actually explore this level a little bit. At one point during the game, the Emmys stop being a concern, and I think that might have been the best part of the game for me, and I was having a lot of fun, and then they sort of get turned back on, and it goes back to just like constant frustration and being upset that these were included in the game at all. Though I will say the one good thing is that if they do catch you and kill you, you don't have to go all the way back to a save point. They just spawn you again outside of the Emmy area, so you can at least get back to trying to stealth around them quickly. Alright, just a few final observations about the game. The music, unfortunately, is quite forgettable. Occasionally they play the theme from Super Metroid, which really just drives home how bland the rest of the music is. I've barely even noticed it as I was playing the game. There's also, for some reason, almost zero settings in this game, like accessibility settings, anything. If you press select, or whatever the button's called on a Switch controller, you can adjust the brightness, and that's it. You can't remap buttons, you can't change subtitle sizes, anything like that. Again, I did find there was too many cutscenes. You have a robot buddy named Adam who talks to you a bunch, and he says basically the same thing every time. You're not strong enough to kill the Emmys, you're not strong enough to kill insert boss name here, do better, and it's really sort of irritating to talk to him. So my general thoughts on the game are, it's okay, it's hit and miss. There are parts of it that are really good, specifically the boss fights, but a lot of it wasn't that great for me. I found the exploration particularly disappointing, and the Emmys I just thought were a bad addition to the game. It's just, I did have quite a lot of fun with a good portion of this game, but every time I was like really building up to liking it and having fun, I ran into something that just sort of lessened my enjoyment of the game entirely. So yeah, again, I do have kind of mixed thoughts on it. Great controls, Samus is fun to fight with, and a lot of abilities are a lot of fun. That dash is absolutely great, but just a lot of it that I didn't really like at all. So if I were to rank this on my big Metroidvania tier chart, I would give it a B if it weren't for the Emmys, but the Emmys are going to take it down to a C because they just really felt like a waste of my time. And I also just wanted to chat a bit about the cost of the game. And originally I wasn't going to pick this up on day one, I was going to wait, and then I thought to myself, well, this is a first-party Nintendo game. It's never getting cheaper, so you may as well just go and get it now. And it made me think about the price of the game. So it's a full price game, and I've often thought to myself, like, what would a full price Metroidvania be like, and how I would really like that. And I'm not sure what makes this full price. I mean, other than it being Nintendo and Super Metroid and knowing that people will pay for it. But it doesn't seem more worth $60, or for me in Canada, $80 plus tax, which is $90, than a lot of other games I've played. In terms of length, my game was 8.5 hours long, technically, on my save file, though I definitely spent longer than that with it. I'm not one of the people who say, oh, a game has to be a certain length for it to be worth a certain amount of money. Games aren't worth my money only when they're bad, so I don't particularly have a problem with the price, but it just got me to thinking, like, for $80, I could have bought Hollow Knight and Blasphemous and Ori and the Blind Forest at their day one prices. I could have got Blasphemous and Bloodstained at their day one prices, and I definitely would have gotten a lot more enjoyment out of either of those than just this single game. So yeah, it's just funny thinking about, like, what makes this a full price game. I don't think it is more polished or more fun than any of the games that I just mentioned. Of course, Hollow Knight should have been more than $15. That's just crazy. But yeah, just got me thinking about what makes a full price game, and in this case it's just brand name recognition more than anything else. So yeah, I guess that's all I have to say about Metroid Dread. I did finish it. I wanted to like it more than I ended up doing it. I doubt I will go back to it. As I said, the map layout was just sort of disorienting, and I don't really feel inclined to go back and try to 100% it or anything. The map is just too disjointed and convoluted for me to want to spend much more time in it. I'm glad I did beat it, and again, some really good boss fights, good controls, definitely has its good moments, but overall, just an okay game for me. That's all I have to say now. Let me know in the comments what you thought of Metroid Dread, or if you think I'm just a baddie who needs to get good. I'm sure there'll be some of those. But anyway, thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you next time.